So the newest addition to Spider-Man's long list of Marvel villains has once again hit theaters, and that would be Kraven the Hunter, a character I myself am not too familiar with, save all this Spider-Man 2 talk. And I am gonna get back to playing that game, but in the meantime I gotta deal with this shit. Going into Kraven with very low expectations, I knew this movie wasn't gonna be great or anything, and yeah, it isn't. But I guess in terms of basic entertainment, it did have the resources to be good. Now though it's not as bad as the other Spider-Man villain movies I've come to know, and less engaging than Venom, it isn't a completely horrible dumpster juice project. It feels like the kind of superhero movie that should have came out when superhero movies were first being made, simply because of how basic and simplistic it turned out to be. Like, this movie is so mid. When it was over, I was left thinking, well, what the fuck am I supposed to talk about? But like, I found some points to break it down into, I guess. So let's just get into this fucking Kraven review. You know, I honestly think villain origin stories are a good idea. I mean, I've seen it done well so many times, you'd think filmmakers would have figured out a formula that works by now, right? Nah, I don't know why so many Spider-Man villain movies are turning out to be anti-heroes or straight up superheroes, man. It's like I can't even pinpoint a characteristic that makes this version of Kraven a villain. Ooh, he kills people. Well, newsflash, people. Heroes kill people too. And Kraven out here only killing people that are like the worst type of people. Drug dealers, murderers, kidnappers. Like, just because they operate outside the law doesn't make them a villain. So when you have a movie like Kraven the Hunter and you categorize it with all these Spider-Man villain movies, I am not buying it. Not one bit. So this has to be the first time I talked about writing on this channel, and fuck, why did it have to be a bad movie? Let me just say, the dialogue in this movie is weird, man. Apart from the ADR, that's automated dialogue replacement for y'all. It's just the way it's written is just bad. There's just so many parts where the characters say a line that'd be fine on its own, but then just ruin it the more they talk.
So how'd it go?
How it always goes.
Alright, good, just end it there, leave room for subtext.
Good for me. Bad for him.
Fuck was that? It's like sometimes you read a comic book and the dialogue comes off as campy because it's a supervillain. And that's okay because it's a comic book or even a cartoon. But when you're dealing with live action characters, they have to speak in a way that's believable or convincing at least. Like, you have moments in comic book movies where characters are being you know...
That's not good. Okay, that's not good.
But it's balanced out with scenes that are so profound and convincing that it works the fuck out. And apart from the dialogue, you have characters that are so poorly written, it's very confusing. Like, Aaron Taylor Johnson's performance as Kraven is good, but the fact that he's like a cold-blooded killer and walks around brooding throughout the entire movie, but then he'll stop to make a joke or be sarcastic, it's like one of those moments where you don't know if you're supposed to laugh. And like, I want to laugh, and it's not like he doesn't have the ability to be funny. I just wish there was more of that instead of what we got. And I did like that Russell Crowe was in this movie because he's just that older veteran actor this movie needed. However, I really don't want to say he was wasted in this movie, but like with Christian Bale in Thor: Love and Thunder, he kinda was. He plays this typical harsh Russian father who's tough on his kids, but like, I don't even think he's in the film or does shit in the film that affects the plot as nearly as much as he should have been. I mean, in the beginning he's all like, mother dead, we go hunt. Sergey almost gets eaten. Why didn't you shoot? You're weak. So Buddy just dips. But then Daddy shows up for the bastard's birthday who gets kidnapped shortly after, and Kraven's all like, pay ransom. No, ransom weak, I'm a legend. And then we just don't fucking see him for the rest of the movie until he's mauled by a bear. You writers really did him dirty. And don't even get me started about Rhino, because as soon as Buddy showed up on screen, I just wanted him to die, okay? But it was so unlikable, it made me wish we got a movie with a Russian Paul Giamatti as the main villain. And you already know how much hate that got. The thing about this version of the Rhino is that he's just not interesting. It's just one of those cases where one of the main characters wronged the villain in the past, and so he's just come back for revenge. And apart from that, the only thing we get about his superhero origins is a fucking scientist who turned him into the Rhino. And that's like the case with every soup in this movie. They only have powers because they drank some shit or took some serum that made them. So fucking lazy, guys. And why the fuck is everyone saying their own villain names in this movie? I am Kraven. I'm the Foreigner. You always said I was a chameleon. They call me Rhino. No, the fuck they don't.
Are you sure you didn't just really want them to, but it never quite worked out?
And Ariana DeBose, I'm so sorry, girl, because you went to an Oscar-winning performance to this shit. Now, I'm a filmmaker, so I already know it's not always the actor's fault, but boy, her line delivery at times was so shit.
I don't like the feel of this at all.
They really chose the worst take she had and just said, yeah, that's good enough. But again, I know it's not your fault. Honestly, it makes me wonder who the writers are in some of these Marvel productions. Because if the writing is this bad on a major production, I don't even see how you got the job, man. So while it's easy to identify bad writing when watching something, bad directing is a bit hard to spot. One of the main components of a film a director is responsible for is blocking, and that's the way in which the characters move according to the camera. But it's not just as simple as movement. A director can also control the performance of an actor, whether there's long or short pauses in between lines or how much energy a character has when they deliver a line. And there are so many parts in Kraven, the Hunter, that just have boring fucking blocking. Take for instance the funeral scene. First off, Kraven stops Calypso as she's walking away.
Sorry about your friend.
Shit.
I didn't mean to scare you.
You did.
Bitch, he was standing right in front of you. And then they go on to talk for a bit before going to a bench outside, and it's just so boring. The characters aren't moving, the cuts are weird, you have moments where she's looking at Kraven and then you cut back and her head's a totally different direction, and this is the case throughout the film. Like, there are good moments where the characters are placed creatively, or correctly I should say, and thus enhancing the performance, but there's just not enough of them. And as someone who wants to be a director someday, this is pretty concerning for me, because this isn't one of those movies that are bad for all the wrong reasons. This is a movie with seemingly intentional mistakes. It just comes across as amateur as fuck when you speak a project like this into existence. Like, I watch a lot of superhero movies, okay? I'm sure most people do now, but I'm sorry, unless you're a religious comic book reader or avid Spider-Man fan, I don't understand the hype that would greenlight a project like this. But more on that later. So one of the first things I noticed right off the bat that were iffy about this movie was the CGI. And going into a superhero movie in this day and age, it's honestly just expected. Even though I do decide before I watch a movie whether I'm going to be reviewing it or not, I try to turn off my brain when it comes to this. Otherwise, I'll just get pissed off. And yeah, the CGI in this movie is not that good. I mean, it's not terrible or even laughably bad when watching it. It's just one of those movies where it's very noticeable. Like, even if you don't have an eye for it, you can clearly see what's practical or digital. I will say this stands out the most when Kraven is CGI, because humans are the hardest character model to replicate. But I also found this to be the case when it came to certain animals, like the fucking mountain leopard. Not only did it look cartoonish, but it also just looked weird, man, like unproportioned. I found the CGI rhino to be fine, but I didn't really like his face, to be honest. It just looked dumb. But also, this is another case where they should have took a bit more from the comics, because he was like way too small. Rhino should look like the Hulk with a horn, okay? And maybe his face being gray too is why it looked fucking weird. Like, I don't even read the comics, but I've seen enough Spider-Man cartoons and games to be like, this isn't right. And it's sad that after 2 attempts, they can't even get a proper Rhino character design, and they were so fucking close. Tell me how you have an underdeveloped Rhino, and in the same movie, you have a line that looks like he hits arm day. And normally I would say, well, at least the CGI wasn't as bad as this movie. But nah, you don't get a pass. This is a fucking Marvel movie, and the bar is very high. Or, it was. Like I said in my Venom 3 review, it's very weird to me that all these Spider-Man villains got their own movie. Like, it'd be one thing if the plan was to build up a Sinister Six movie, and like, it was, but once Morbius and Madam Web were added to the roster, that shit became less fucking likely. And that's a shame, because I wish we could live in a world where bad movies are only made by amateurs and professionals only make good movies. But it's just more complicated than that. While film requires the collaboration of thousands of people when it comes to blockbusters, it's also just very difficult to make a good one. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those movies that's debatable. The general consensus between critics and fans alike are that these movies are bad. And following the unsuccessful opening of Kraven, Sony did announce that these films were not going to be made anymore. News also came out this week that Spider-Man was able to be in any one of these films this whole time, enraging fans. But I do think this is a blessing in disguise, because people still very much like Spider-Man and believe in the idea. What would the turnout be if Spider-Man, Marvel's most beloved character, was in so many bad movies? It wouldn't be very good, would it? I think it's better that Spider-Man and their actors were left out of these projects, and for these projects to not even exist. That being said, I am curious to see where the Sony-Verse goes from here with all this backlash, because the fact that we had 3 of these fucking things in 1 year and only 1 MCU movie it's
just dumb.
And it's even more dumb to me that, much like with the MCU releasing projects for characters that no one cared about, this villain-verse could have been effective if the projects were about characters that fans care about. And I think Kraven is one of those characters. Like Venom, Kraven, Rhino, Vulture, etc. movies could have formed into something like what we're seeing with Thunderbolts, or the good Suicide Squad at least. But no, it's like these production companies don't listen to their fans, and when they do, it comes off as all distorted, where it's like, well, that's not exactly what I wanted, but I'll take it. But whatever, I could go on and on about the misfires of this movie and Sony's decision, but I'm kind of fucking tired of talking about it. This movie wasn't that much fun, funny, and is entertaining if you're someone who's never seen a good superhero movie. It's not unwatchable, but nothing worth going to see if you want to save time or money. Because though I love superhero movies and villain origin stories, Kraven ain't no villain, and this movie is nothing special from what we've seen before.